Sony fans, I know you're frustrated. This felt like a lost year for Sony TVs. I mean, the Bravia 8 Mark II felt like a slightly brighter A95L, but in the guise of a mid-tier TV. But the leaks for 2026 Sony flagship TVs are coming out fast. Remember the RGB LED advanced technology that you guys saw earlier this year? That secret sauce that most predicted will cost way over $10,000? It's going to be on the Bravia 9 Mark II. But that's not the big news. It is the Bravia 7 Mark II, which will also include RGB Mini LED technology. Yes! Let's be real, this year was not Sony's year for excitement. Its newest TV was the Bravia 5, really an entry-level attempt at Mini LED, which is fine, right? For those of you looking for an affordable Sony with a touch of Mini LED magic, you got it. It's a Sony X90L with Mini LED, essentially, right? A little bit of iteration improvement here, a little bit of processing there. Most importantly, an improved 98-inch at the entry level that is Mini LED. The A95L rolls out again for the third year at the 77-inch size, and at the 55 and 65, you got a mild refresh of QD OLED with the Bravia 8 Mark II, but even then it had its issues. Mostly it was in the case of a Bravia 8, essentially a mid-tier TV with all its mid-tier weaknesses, like a stand that wasn't very impressive. And image quality, yeah, it's pretty good. It's a Sony QD OLED, but ultimately this wasn't the wow TV you were hoping would take over for the A95L. Now, speaking of A95L, I think 2026 will also have a greatly improved QD OLED that is Master Series level, but not this year. So we have that to look forward to, QD OLED fans. But for everyone else looking at that RGB LED technology, ultimately, RGB LED is going to be a thing. And here's the kicker. It will also come as an RGB Mini LED on the Bravia 7 Mark II. But let's start with the Bravia 9 Mark II. So we were predicting it'd be given a name like Bravia 10, Bravia 11, but it makes sense that RGB LED would be on the Bravia 9 Mark II, right? Because otherwise, you still have the Bravia 9 moniker. Where does it go? Because if you call it a Bravia 10 or Bravia 11, then you're saying that the Bravia 9 will be pretty good flagship, but one short of RGB LED. What would that be? Because the Bravia 9, I think, is already exhausted where full array local dimming with Mini LED has gone. Add more dimming zones, make Mini LED brighter. I think the Bravia 9 is the epitome of that technology right now. I mean, comparing it with this year's TCL QM8K or the Hisense U7, U8, they still don't compare. I think Sony has really squeezed all it can out of that technology. So the next logical step is to bring RGB LED to the Bravia 9, right? Why waste the Bravia 10 moniker? Save it for something else. Make the Bravia 9 Mark II that flagship TV to hold the new technology RGB LED. Now, RGB LED, let's be clear, RGB LED very similar to RGB Mini LED that you heard from Hisense, as well as micro RGB from Samsung. What are the big differences? Well, in principle, all three are the same. They're all LCD TVs, but the backlight, instead of white backlight traditionally on a Mini LED backlight, they've all been replaced with red, green, and blue individual LEDs, right? Individual colors that, when taken together, it gives you a better sense of color saturation on these LCD TVs. So it's that next step up for Mini LED TVs. So essentially, RGB LED by Sony or RGB Mini LED by Hisense or micro RGB is that next step up for Mini LED TVs. Now, Sony's RGB LED, it has one slight advantage, and this is something we learned when we were at Sony. Specifically, they've taken 10 years to develop this technology in-house. It's their version of RGB Mini LED that you see on Hisense or on Samsung, and I think this one is going to be exciting. What we'll see on the Bravia 9 Mark II with RGB LED is slightly better processing, more nuanced processing, right? Maybe better shadows, better skin tones, slightly better blooming control. It's the little things that make a Sony, but more importantly, you heard me mention the Bravia 7 Mark II as its version of an affordable RGB Mini LED. Now notice I said RGB Mini LED. I honestly don't think the Bravia 7 Mark II will be using Sony's in-house RGB LED. Way too expensive. I think that's still reserved for the flagship. Instead, it will be using some more affordable version, possibly from Hisense, and this is why I say so. First of all these leaks and news bits came from High Def News. Check them out on Twitter. Thank you, High Def, for giving us these leaks. Now, I put two and two together, so here's my nuanced understanding. On the one hand, you have the leak out of Omdia that Sony will be introducing RGB Mini LED to the Bravia 9 Mark II and the Bravia 7 Mark II. Okay, we got that out of the way. The question is, will they both be using the same Sony RGB LED? I don't think so. Sony has its own version of RGB LED that it will put on the Bravia 9 Mark II, unless maybe there are 3 versions of this RGB Mini LED technology. You might have a mystery Halo TV that uses Sony's RGB LED, maybe super expensive, and then you have possibly the Bravia 9 Mark II using RGB Mini LED from a third-party source, not Sony, to make it more affordable, and then even a more affordable version of the RGB Mini LED on the Bravia 7 Mark II. And why say more affordable? The more affordable version would be what Hisense is using. So there's been another leak out of China that Hisense is selling an affordable 85-inch RGB Mini LED TV with 1,000 dimming zones, whatever, for $2,500. $2,500. Okay, so if you take that backlight technology that's relatively affordable on this 85-inch, you bring it to Sony, whether you put it on the Bravia 9 Mark II or the Bravia 7 Mark II, suddenly you can make these TVs first perform better with RGB Mini LED and more affordable because they may not be using Sony's in-house RGB LED, which I tell you, it's going to be significantly more expensive. And notice up to this point, I haven't mentioned the brightness. We know the brightness is going to be phenomenal, right? More than 2,000 nits peak specular highlights, and that's enough. If you saw in my earlier videos about brightness wars being over, right? It doesn't matter anymore. At this point, all the advanced technology TVs easily will hit 2,000 nits or more. And it doesn't even need to get that high. But the truth is, with movie HDR content being so dim, doesn't matter. 2,000 nits, more than enough. What does matter is image processing of low bitrate content, whether it's from streaming or DVDs, whatever it is, right? This is where I think Sony's strength of image processing, that flex they're so known for, this is where they're going to take advantage of the superior image processing plus this next generation technology, and suddenly you're going to have these compelling TVs, which, okay, so at the end of the day, this is what's going to happen. And some of you may dislike this move. I think it's necessary. Sony will be adding anti-glare matte technology, very similar to what Samsung and TCL has done this year. TCL added it to the extra large sizes of the QM6K, and of course Samsung has doubled down and added that matte anti-glare to all of its upper-end TVs, and I think Sony will follow suit. I've seen all iterations of this, and let me tell you, in a bright room with lots of windows, it's really helpful. I did a workout video using Samsung's fitness mode right next to a bright window. Wow, it looks so much better with the anti-glare matte screen. I cannot live without it in that room. So that TV in that room needs to be anti-glare. And I suspect many consumers have similar living arrangements where you have a bright window nearby. You're going to end up wanting that matte anti-glare. It's not a complete TV year unless Sony has some swagger, right? Now, if this is exciting to you, you'll be excited to know that the TV brightness wars are over. Check out that video up here, or my latest rant on how dim HDR movies have become.